Hello and welcome to Brain Injury Bites, where we provide help and advice for people after a brain injury. Hi, I'm Ashwini and I'm a trustee at Headway Warrington. I'm also a senior associate solicitor focusing on catastrophic injury, including brain injury.
My name's Brooke and I've lived with a traumatic brain injury since 2007.
In today's episode, we're going to be talking about dating and relationships. Brooke, I'll be talking to you about your specific experiences around this area, and then we'll explore a little bit more the issues that can arise in terms of change of dynamics in relationships and marriages following a brain injury, as well as providing some helpful hints and tips. Of course, a lot of what we'll be discussing today will be around your specific experiences, Brooke. So we do appreciate that this is quite a wide-ranging topic, but we hope that you'll find it useful anyway. We've previously talked about socialising as being part of the idea of love and belonging. But the other side to this is, of course, romantic relationships and intimacy. Brooke, why don't you tell us about some of your experiences with relationships and dating after you had your brain injury? When did you feel that you felt able to explore dating again?
I suppose I'd been in hospital. I'd been discharged from hospital. Everybody was still coming to see me, seeing that, I guess my parents glad to have me home. But I suppose the hysteria of that only lasted for a certain amount of time. Eventually I was back in Scarborough. I'd got two support workers, Laura and Tim. Tim got me something that I was into before. I was going to the gym. And so Tim used to take me to the gym. And I noticed that I hadn't really spoken to a girl in ages. You get a lot of one thing you get a lot of when you come out of hospital is, or when you've had a big injury, is you get a lot of attention, you get a lot of sympathy, and people saying. And one thing I used to hate was when people used to say that to me, and it just makes you feel so. I didn't feel like I was worthier anymore. I was just like somebody that somebody felt sorry for. And so what Tim did was he got me on something called POF, which is Plenty of Fish, which is, I'm sure people would have heard of it. It was like a free dating site online. I had a couple of dodgy ones in Scarborough, one specific one, and this ties into disinhibition, I think. When you sat opposite someone, I noticed that she had, when you smell someone, this makes me sound really awful and I don't want to come across badly, but occasionally you notice that somebody's got a bit of bad breath. Afterwards, we went and got an ice cream from the Harbour Bar, and we ate our ice creams and stuff, and we ended the night on a snog. Then we arranged to meet next time. It happened again. I noticed it again, and then the third time we met, I thought, I know what I'll do. And this makes me sound really bad, but this was my process of thinking. I thought, I know what I'll do. I'll help her out here, and I'll buy some chewing gum before we go. And I had this thing where I was like, I wasn't really. It's disinhibition. That's what it is. You don't think about what you're doing. So I told her that she had bad breath. And I told her that, it's all right. I've bought you some chewing gum. I gave her the chewing gum, and she was not best pleased.
And in your head, you were thinking, well, surely she'd be thanking you.
I was expecting a thank you because I thought I was doing a good thing, but I didn't really take into consideration how she'd have felt.
Yeah, no, that's obviously classic disinhibition there. Before we move on, I mean, did you find that by doing it through internet dating, it was almost easier because there was that sort of level of removal? You were able to, interact with people
when you
in your own time.
Everybody who's done internet dating, I mean, there's a few success stories. I know I've been to a wedding a couple of months ago. They met on Tinder, but the vast majority of people who've been involved in internet dating has had a terrible time with it. I guess because it's not texting a real person, you're texting a profile picture until you actually meet, and it turns out that you meet that person, and the photos being covered in filters and what have you, and it's just 9 times out of 10 you're not meeting the person that you were expecting to meet.
It's a different type of fake environment, I guess.
It is, yeah. It's like we spoke about hospital being a fake environment. The dating world is certainly a fake environment, especially seeing as like all the manipulation that you can do with photos and stuff now. And I've probably done it myself, but so you get these people who like Barbie and Ken meeting, and they just look absolutely nothing like that. So the initial, when you meet, the initial emotion you feel is disappointment. So that's never a good thing to start on, is it?
No, and I suppose much like you can curate a photograph, you can curate a profile. There are pros and cons to the whole premise, I guess, because you've got time on the one hand to think about your responses. It's not like being face to face with someone. You can choose when to text, choose when to send an email. That's
something that's caught me out massively, is that, well, particularly why social media was so good for me, because it was good because even though you're responding quite quickly online, you still got like 10 seconds or so to think of that response, and in real life you don't get that.
Yeah.
And particularly with me, my brain works slowly, and I just found that I easily get overwhelmed, particularly if you go out into a bar or something. I found like the lights were low, so you're like straining to see, and if there's music on, you'd have been like straining to hear them above the music, and there's all these things. And what I sort of likened it to. I liken everything to a mobile phone, and it's like a mobile phone. Your battery, your battery life just goes down, down, down.
Yeah, and it's increased cognitive demand.
Yeah,
there's lots of things going on.
All these different things are draining your battery. Yeah, so that also affects your ability to have a fluid conversation and appear okay.
So you were in Scarborough. You then moved back to Manchester.
Yeah, it was always my ambition to move back to Manchester. Probably because I was so this is where I'm different. Every brain injury is different, isn't it? You've got there's that saying that if you've seen one brain injury, you've seen one brain injury, and this is my story. Like, I wasn't in a relationship. I wasn't full-time employed. I was a student. I was, worked part-time at a bar. I loved my life at the time. Ever since then, I've been trying to get back to that person I was then, which was a 24-year-old lad who was a student, which is not, that's not a popular position to be in. And I...
So were you trying to almost pick up where you left off?
Yeah, I was. And you look back and you remember those good times. But, again, like the fake environment, student life is not a real environment, is it? You don't have a normal life. And I suppose I was trying to, all this time I've been trying to get back to that 24-year-old student. And I suppose that's why I've had difficulty in fitting back in, because I was trying to get back to being that 24-year-old student who went out and socialised all the time. And that's what I saw as my goal to get back to. But of course, during the time, everyone else has been, finishing the degree, getting the job, carrying on with the career. And I found that I've just got very little in common with people.
So you moved back to Manchester, and amongst the various things that you got yourself into, one of them was speed dating.
The speed dating thing, I've actually done that a few times. It's actually quite good, and I would recommend it to anyone. Even if you're in a couple, go together. It's I think the thing was, for me, you get like mini dates, like 3 minutes. So I thought about, in my head, I'd rehearsed what I was going to do on this mini date, and I just exhausted myself putting all my effort into that. And then I remember looking up after the first one or two. So I had another 8 people to meet, and I just remember just being absolutely exhausted. And the last 8 was just honestly just trying to get through it.
I guess it can be very difficult, because with brain injury recovery, a lot of it is about pacing yourself. And we've certainly discussed that when talking about fatigue, the need to pace yourself, to take things slowly, give yourself time. But speed dating, of course, is very much the opposite. It's very quick. You've got to have that persona that you want to put across in 2 minutes repeatedly.
Yeah, and you try not to say the same things, and like you can hear you sat near somebody that you've had like a previous date with before, and you try not to let them hear you saying the same things that you said to them to the other person. But it's what it was like a massive cognitive drain, and it was just it just exhausted me, and I learned I learned the importance of pacing myself there, and something else that came into play there was my memory problems. A lot of brain injury for me has been about trying to fit in again, and you try to. Although people say you should be proud of your brain injury and what have you, it's not something I wanted to. I've always wanted to make it look as if I didn't have a brain injury. One of the first dates I went on was to the cinema in Parswood in Didsbury, where I live. I remember I was sat in the cinema and I went to the toilet, and then I came back into the cinema and I was like, oh my God, where am I sat? You're then trying to look around in this dark room, trying not to look like you've actually lost yourself, but trying to casually find your seat. I remember like I got into such a panic. I mean, it was dark, everyone was watching the film, and you don't want to pace up and down. I remember thinking about just sitting at the front and just watching the rest of the film by myself. But I had this date to get back to. Anyway, luckily I found her. But that's something that I've taken on now. I always, whenever I'm somewhere and I leave my seat, I always remember where I'm sat. It's happened to me a number of times. It happened to me in restaurants. I'd go to the toilet and then you come back out, especially if it's a big restaurant, and you just think, oh my God, where am I sat? I mean, it was good. It's where mobile phones could come, and I was with my family at the time, and I just rung my mum to come and get me. And you do need to take a mental note of where you sat, particularly in car parks if you drive. The Trafford Centre is an absolute nightmare. I've spoken about when I got lost outside John Lewis. This thing happened to me. I was with somebody that I'd only met a couple of times on a train like a couple of weeks ago, and we were going over to Liverpool, and I went to the toilet. I came back out, and then you realise on your way back that you haven't remembered where you sat. And I'm looking about and I can't see where I'm sat, and I was walking along, and then I got to the end of the carriage, and I thought, oh no, did I actually turn the right way out of the toilet? And then just at that moment he shouted me. But it's just the embarrassment factor, and I'm not saying I'm not proud of having a brain injury. I wouldn't say that at all, but it's not something
you don't want to draw attention
to.
You
don't want to draw some attention to it, no. Yeah. And I don't think...
and I guess that's personal to you. People will approach that differently, and some people will be happy to be, heart on sleeve, cards on the table, this is what it is. Other people might want to keep that back. Everybody's different, and there's no right or wrong way.
That's where the that Headway brain injury card can come in useful as well. Because if I want to go onto the... True. I remember when I first got discharged from hospital, I got a disability rail card. I was on the train, and there was the guard who'd come along, charged me 50 quid for a full price ticket. Yeah. Because I think my rail card was out of date by about a couple of weeks, and my dad went because, and I was like, I remember because I was like, I still had this big scar there, and I told this guard, I was like proper like. Couldn't, I'm sorry, I'm just really, really sorry. And I was so shaken up, and it was like one of my first outings, and I'd got and he charged me like another 50 quid because I think it was out of date. And he's like, I remember the guard saying, yeah, I've just been in hospital, I've just been in a coma. And he says, yeah, I can see you've had an injury there. And I remember my dad going mental, and that was like, could have finished someone off. That could have knocked someone's confidence. I suppose me being disinhibition, I didn't really give a but that's the only reason I got through it. But
from what you've told me about some of your experiences with the dating, I guess there's a lot more that goes in. Dating in itself is terrifying. It's, it's putting yourself out there, laying yourself open for other people to see whether or not, you are attractive to them. It's terrifying. But I guess when you mix a brain injury into it, it's also all the additional strategies that you've discussed, taking a note of where you've sat, whereabouts in the restaurant, the cinema you might be, so that you're not leaving your date hanging because you've gone to the toilet and you can't remember where you are, and then them wondering, have you done a runner?
Yeah.
And, the memory issues as well, in terms of what have I told this person, trying to maintain that, trying to think about, it's, I guess a lot of it is also having that insight where you might have certain, I don't really like the word deficits, but perhaps that is, or just issues, where you might need some additional support.
Do you know what it's always taught me? That something I've picked up on, which is a good thing, is that I always tell the truth. I don't know if it's a Mark Twain quote, that if you always tell the truth, you don't have to remember anything. So, I mean, you've got enough going on in your head as it is without trying to remember a story.
The other thing that I was thinking about, and again, this comes back to the context of love and belonging, and we've touched on this already, that, when you moved to Manchester, you were meeting people and at a different stage, I guess, to them. You have also, I think there was another example where you felt that gulf in a way, when you went on a date with someone who worked at a prison.
One of the things dating did for me was it really highlighted how different I was from everyone else in my sort of peer group. I went to meet this girl who was a year older than me, but she was just so much older than me in herself. She worked at Strange Ways prison in Manchester. I can't remember what role she did. She wasn't a prison guard, but she was something. But I remember her being just so much. She felt so much older than me. I felt like I felt quite like a pathetic child in her presence. I realised that she, on a daily basis, she was dealing with some of the most dangerous prisoners in the UK, and I realised that on a daily basis, I was having to go to bed like up to 3 times a day because I couldn't even stay awake for the whole day. I was occasionally going to basic charity, and I was just doing my few hours rehab, which in itself exhausted me. And I just remember feeling, I guess that's the self-worth thing, isn't it? I just remember feeling so quite pathetic.
Did you tell her you had a brain injury?
I think I did, I went through this period of, I would tell everyone like what had happened to me, and because I had this thing because I did so little in my life or on a day-to-day basis, for instance, in comparison to somebody that was dealing with the UK's worst prisoners, I would tell them this story, and I would tell them this mad story how I'd been walking home down Portland Street in Manchester, and I got hit by a car at 50 miles an hour. I'd been in a coma, and it was just, I did it really because I didn't ever want to sound uninteresting, and this was something that always got people's attention. But it was, in hindsight, it was probably too early to say that.
Why do you think it was too early?
I'm not saying don't tell them you've got a brain injury, but I think to be the first thing that you say to people, I think it kind of shocked people. Going to that first impressions thing, isn't it? Like it just shocks people. I suppose awareness of our own brain injury has increased, and it's increasing all the time. But particularly then, back in 2013-14, they heard the word brain, and people would generally run a mile. And I think looking back, what I was doing wrong was I was being overly confident, but it was fake confidence. So I was like trying to get this story out, and that'll be the first thing I told them, try and sound interesting, but I just must have sounded a bit crazy.
Maybe not crazy, but perhaps a bit full on.
Yeah, full on's a good way. Yeah. And I think I sent people the other way, and I didn't. There's quite a few things. Quite a few instances I didn't get a second date, and do you know what? I didn't even necessarily fancy that person, but it was because they didn't want a second date with me. I was like, why not? What's wrong with me, kind of thing. And and then, you know, if I did fancy them, it was just like, it was really, I used to take it to heart, and I was always wondering what was the right way to go about it. And to be honest, I probably still haven't worked it out, but if anyone's, you know, wanting to do this themselves, because it's everyone's individual, aren't they? But the approach I've gone for, or I go for now, is try and get them to get to know me a little bit before I tell them that. I think you definitely have to tell people, but...
And do you perhaps now try to learn more about them as well before introducing that conversation in about yourself?
Yeah. Something I watched, it was a brain injury rehabilitation program, and in the brain injury rehabilitation, what people tend to do is they tend to talk about themselves a lot.
Yeah.
And this brain injury rehabilitation, what they did, they had like it was a ball, and they're holding the ball, and when you've got the ball, you talk about yourself, then you've got to pass it to someone else. So it was trying to, you know, to encourage you to listen to other people, and listening is such a big thing.
Yeah, I suppose listening is a big thing, and definitely, even absent a brain injury, it's important in a dating scenario. But then you've also got the added factor of remembering what's been said, and being able to bring that back into conversation.
Yeah, that's a concentration thing. You've got to, if somebody, you don't just ask people a question, you've got to make an effort to listen to people as well, rather than just asking them and then just switching off while they speak and then waiting for your turn to speak.
It's, again, cognitively demanding.
Cognitively demanding, that's what it is.
And so now perhaps your strategy is to leave the conversation about brain injury until a little bit later on. How do people react? Have you had instances where people have wanted to know more, where they've perhaps then gone and learnt about it independently?
That comes back to everybody being individual, isn't it? Some people have been great about it, some people have been not. So there's times when I've wanted to go on a date with this person, and people have advised me that you have to be honest with them, you know, and if they don't like it, then it's their problem, and you don't want to be with them in the first place. But what I find is that's not really giving people a chance. There's a way to go about things, because I just find that if you tell them in the right context and you tell them in the right way, then, you know, they might well be open to it.
No, well, of course it can be full on, and again, that's, I guess, part of the game of dating is, you know, whatever it is when you introduce certain topics, big topics, whatever
there's no one size fits all for it, is there?
No,
everybody's different. So.
And yeah, unfortunately for some people, the label of brain injury might not be something that they're willing to learn more about or take the time to get to know you with. But that's unfortunate. That's dating as well, isn't it, to a large degree? And that, I suppose, brings me on to the next topic in this, because up until now we've talked about your specific experiences around dating, but as we said at the beginning, that's personal to you. I'm also mindful that a number of our listeners will be in more established relationships, marriages potentially, or they might be supporting somebody, a spouse, partner who's had a brain injury. They themselves might have a brain injury, or and their spouse is supporting them. There's so many statistics out there. Depending on where you go, those statistics differ, but I think there's a common perception anyway that after a brain injury, there's a high chance of a relationship breaking down, because the person that was before the injury is not the same person after the injury. And we've talked about that quite a lot in previous episodes. And so it's also thinking about support for those relationships and what can be done. And I know certainly I've put this in place with people I've supported in terms of additional counselling, to mourn the loss of the person that was, and to try and find a way through for the relationship, to support the brain injured person, but also for the non-brain injured party of a relationship to have an outlet, to be able to talk, to grieve, and to understand. Because at the end of the day, a relationship, it's two halves of a whole, and where something significant like this comes into play, it upsets that balance. And it's about being able to be strong and resilient in order to be able to regain some sense of balance and move forwards. And for some people, that can be done. I have seen it done well, but in other cases, unfortunately, it can come to an end. Thinking about help and advice then for our listeners, I guess, again, we can sort of almost split this into two. So from a dating perspective, we've talked about the extra strategies that might be involved in terms of preparing yourself for dating, in utilising strategies around memory, around fatigue, which can be really important in order to try and feel confident around it, because it's difficult enough, without a brain injury. Honesty, I thought that was a really good tip, Brooke. Being open and honest, of course, it means that you're not having to remember some fantastical story that you've made up, and it's showing the true self. But obviously, as you say, it's different for every situation and every individual as to when you might want to open up about what's happened, about your injury and how it affects you.
I think that's one thing I've lost, is the ability to be spontaneous. And everything is better if I'm prepared for it.
Yeah. A lot of it is also shoring up the resources around you, friends, family, people that you trust, because, as I said, dating is quite difficult. It can be terrifying, and it can knock your confidence if you go on a date and then the other person's not interested for whatever reason, which might be completely unconnected to your brain injury. But it's difficult enough. Add in the brain injury, and we know that a number of people can be prone to more depression as well. So it's important to really prepare and be prepared that not every date is going to be successful, that you're not necessarily going to find the love of your life, on that date. It's very difficult, isn't it?
One thing I was told, that when I initially wanted to start looking for a partner, I was told that, they could meet them anyway. It'll happen. And that's one thing. Nothing just happens. You have to put yourself in situations where it's more likely to happen. Like if you join a club, it's much more likely to happen at the club where you're meeting 20 people than it would be if you're sitting at home doing nothing, waiting for it to happen.
Of course, absolutely. Putting yourself out there, but with shoring up your resources and giving yourself the best possible opportunity. And then for our listeners who are in relationships, thinking about brain injury specific marriage counselling and brain injury education. And I really can't stress enough the importance of brain injury education, because that injury has such a wide impact on so many areas of life. And it's important to understand that the way someone acts, the way they behave, isn't their fault. It's as a result of something that they cannot control because of a process in their brain. So it's being able to understand how their brain might work now and understand what sort of strategies need to be used so that you can have a meaningful relationship. But I do also strongly advocate for counselling for the non-brain injured individual. And I've seen this time and again with people that I support, that the focus is on the brain injured individual. And you yourself have said this, Brooke, when you were out of hospital or when you were in hospital, and then when you were out of it, everyone was positive. It was all about you. It was that fake environment. But the other spouse partner can get left behind, and that can definitely have an impact on their own self-identity and sense of worth, because they may feel that suddenly all they are now is a carer and a supporter, and they've lost that sense of themselves. They've lost the person that they fell in love with. And so that counselling for them to have an outlet for their grief, for their own personal, for them to work things out on their own. And above all, remember that good relationships don't just happen, they take work from both sides.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you check the footnotes for more help, advice and resources.
Please don't forget to follow, subscribe and share our content. If you do have any suggestions for topics that you'd like us to cover, why not drop us a line at hi@braininjurybites.co.uk.